Okay, so today we're going to look at some examples of how to find missing angles when we have parallel lines cut by a transversal. So this first example is an example of consecutive interior angles. These angles add up to 180 degrees. We know this because this angle and the 122 degrees also add up to 180 degrees. And this angle that I just highlighted in green and the angle with the X value, those are corresponding angles. So in order to find our value of X, we are going to subtract 180 minus 122. And that will give us the value of X. So when I subtract, this will be 10, 7, we get 58 degrees, and that is our value of X, 58 degrees. Okay, now looking at our second example, we have an example of corresponding angles. If you look at your vocabulary, these are corresponding angles. They lay on the same side of the transversal in corresponding positions. These angles are congruent. And congruent means equal. So if this angle is 63 degrees, y is also 63 degrees. All right, so for our third example, again, I'm just going to look at my vocabulary. And looking at these are alternate exterior angles. They lay on the outside of the transversal on opposite sides. We saw last week why these alternate exterior angles are congruent by rotations, and so these angles are also congruent. So that means if this angle is 108 degrees, X is also 108 degrees. Remember last week when we were looking at the angles and started to discover that due to transformations, if the lines are parallel, the alternate exterior angles will be congruent. Okay, moving on to our next example, we are looking, again, if I look at my vocabulary, we are looking at alternate interior angles. These angles are inside the parallel lines, and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. Here's our transversal. They're on opposite sides, and they're inside the parallel lines. These angles are also congruent. So that means if the first angle is 55 degrees, y is also 55 degrees. For our next example, we are looking at same side exterior angles. So if you look, they're on the same side of the transversal, and they're both outside the parallel lines. So they're same side exterior angles. These angles are supplementary, which means that they add up to 180 degrees. One way I can show that they add up to 180 is if you look at this 131 and this angle right here, we know those are supplementary. They add up to 180. Well, if we go back and we look at this angle and this angle are corresponding. They're congruent. So we need to subtract 180 minus 131 to find the value of X. So if I go ahead and subtract, I should get 49 degrees. For my next example, there's no specific name. You're just going to have to go through a couple steps to figure out what the angle measure is. So if I look at this, I see 115 here. Well, if I look by using alternate interior angles, I know this angle is also 115 degrees as well. I can find the value of y because I know that this 115 degree angle and this angle right here are supplementary. This means that those two angles add up to 180 degrees. So that means to find y, I am going to take 180 degrees and subtract 115. And that will give me 65 degrees. Okay, after this video, you are going to go on to Delta Math and you are going to do this assignment, Transversals. And when you start with this level 1, it's going to be a little bit easier, but in level 2, it gets to be a little more complicated. So I'm going to show you a couple examples that don't look like what we've already done. Okay, so in level 2, notice it says level 2 up here. You're going to see examples where you may have 3 parallel lines. And notice, look at my directions up here. It says, given that L is parallel to M, which is parallel to N, find the value of X. So that's what this means right here, parallel. These lines are parallel. So I'm just going to highlight this line and this line because that has the information on it. And we already know they're parallel. And if I look at the position of my angles, we have 36 degrees here and we need to know that angle. Well, if you look, they're on the same side of the transversal in the same position. So these are corresponding angles. This means that these angles are congruent. They have the same angle measure. So if that angle is 36 degrees, X is 36 degrees. Okay, next example. Again, we're looking at level 2. We have 3 sets of parallel lines. And here we're only looking at these first 2. We don't even need to look at this one. This one doesn't even matter. And looking at this, we have alternate exterior angles. Because these angles are alternate exterior angles, we know that they're congruent. So if this angle right here is 62 degrees, then this angle X is also 62 degrees. Okay, last example. We're still in level 2. And this one where you have to find 2 missing angles. So first we're going to look at X. So 52 degrees is across from X. So I know that those 2 angles are vertical angles. And we know that vertical angles are congruent. So if that first angle is 52 degrees, then X also has to be 52 degrees. Now to find the value of Y, I'm going to use what I know about angles and see how they form a straight line right here. We have a linear pair or supplementary angles. So Y, angle Y in this 52 are supplementary. This means that those 2 angles add up to 180. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to subtract 52 from 180. So when we subtract, we should get 128 degrees. So 128 for Y and 52 for X.